Have you ever looked at something and just thought, mate, why? 1.4 grams of gear. 1.4 grams of gear. Now, there's a stupid mindset that many people have in the gym as well as in the realm of bodybuilding, and that's that if I take more steroids, then I'm going to get bigger. And that's just simply not the truth. There's a threshold that you get to where it then starts to spill over the glass, if that makes sense. Yes, you're getting better and better effects to a point, and then it gets diminishing because you're basically just injecting yourself, getting the side effects, but not getting the positive benefits that you would have from taking steroids, basically. And the funny thing is as well, many people have the same mindset, whether it be in bodybuilding, in the gym, in sports, or just in the general consensus of populace, basically. Everyone frigging around that has the idea of, if I took steroids then I would look like that. If I took steroids then I would be big. And of course, if you know anything about the steroids or even the slightest thing about steroids, you would know that that's not the case. You don't just take steroids and get big. I'm sure you probably know someone, I'm speaking to you right now, who knows someone who's taking steroids who hasn't trained before. I'm sure we've all known someone who's done that, right? I know someone who did that and they ended up in hospital from heart complications, and they weren't even big because they didn't even train. They just took gear. They were a barber. Anyway, it's stupid, and in this video I actually want to go over why that is, why it's incredibly stupid, why taking more and more steroids is not going to give you a positive effect when you're doing everything else wrong, as well as some other things also. But first, here's a word from someone that we all know.
I would recommend to all of you, subscribe to Cal today and watch this young man keep bringing you the bangers.
Now, as stated earlier, a common phrase that many people would say when they see someone like a Nick Walker, or a bodybuilder in general, or someone who is just jacked, is, I would look like that if I was on steroids. Oh, steroids do wonders. Oh yeah, of course you look like that. You're on steroids. You think that the reason these people are better than me is because they're on drugs, or they're taking more drugs. Well, guess what? Wrong.
The only reason they're better than me is because they're taking more steroids. And that makes you feel better. You feel okay about yourself now because you're saying to yourself that you work just as hard as them. They're only better because they're taking drugs or they're taking more drugs. Guess what? Wrong. 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 Wrong.
No, that's not the case. That's literally not the case. But why do people think like this? Why do people have the idea that if you take steroids, if you inject yourself, probably even once, that you're somehow going to get huge and you're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, friggin' or Ronnie Coleman, Dorian Yates, whoever. Just name your favorite bloody jacked guy. They think you're going to look like that off of one steroid shot, and that's not the case. And I think the reason why people say that is because they basically put two and two together. You can't look like Ronnie Coleman, you can't look like Jay Cutler without taking steroids. Therefore, if you took the steroids, you would then in turn look like Jay Cutler. It's kind of a weird conundrum that people have. And it's funny because Chris Williamson said that to Sebum in himself, saying that if I take what Sebum's taking, then I would look like Sebum.
We've spoken before, and I think that it's a smart approach that you have of not talking about the things that you use and dosages, because it's just going to result in people doing, if I take X, then equals Chris Bumstead.
Then I'll look like Chris Bumstead.
Precisely.
Exactly, yeah. But I think a lot of maybe aspiring kids who just want to maybe look like me or look like a pro bodybuilder, they'd be like, no, I got to take this, but he's lying. I need more to be like that. Why don't I look like that? And they don't see, A, my amazing genetics, shout out to my parents for that, and then B, the 10 years of work I put in that has been consistent, you know?
And that's simply not the case. If me or you were to take the exact same steroid cycle that Chris Bumstead took in his prime, at his peak physique in the Mr. Olympia, we wouldn't look like Chris Bumstead. No one would look like Chris Bumstead. Even if Ramon Dino took the same stuff that freaking Chris Bumstead did, he wouldn't look like him. Now, of course, that's the genetic makeup that he has in his structure, in his physique, but at the same time, he just wouldn't have the same effects because sebum reacts to that type of steroid different than Ramon would. They're going to be taking different compounds, but that being said, most people who take steroids don't even look like they take steroids. That's literally just a harsh truth for many people. People aren't doing it correctly, or they're doing it too much and their body's not reacting to it well, so they think they can just take more and in turn they're going to get bigger that way. Like what? And this guy in this video is no different. Literally look at his steroid sack right there. He's taking 1.4 grams of gear for a, don't want to say mid physique because he has a better physique than the average person, but for someone who's taking that much steroids, that many steroids, mate, you don't look like you take steroids. You don't look like you take steroids, let alone that much. If you told someone that you're taking steroids, they'd probably think you're on a beginner cycle. You're just taking TRT levels of friggin' test, not all of these compounds. 1.4 grams of gear. 1.4 grams of gear. Now, I'm not someone who's against gear usage, especially if you want to compete. As he says here, he wants to do classic physique. And he makes a good point in saying that gear does not automatically make you 250 pounds lean, that fake natties really give a fake perception, and how people can just blow up really quickly. But mate, you could be doing it a little bit smarter, couldn't you? 1.4 grams. Necessary. And it's funny because he literally made a post in himself saying, oh, a common mistake is that taking gear is going to make you 260 pounds lean or something like that, and that there's misconceptions online that are put up by fake naturals. Mate, like, what? I think you have the mindset that if you take more compounds, or if you take more of those compounds, that you're going to get bigger. That's just not the case. Now, there are a few reasons for why this guy will look like this. I will get onto the main one later, but the most common one that people get is the fact that they don't actually take training or their diet or recovery seriously at all, basically. They basically have the idea that, as I was saying earlier, if you take steroids, then you're going to get bigger. It doesn't work like that. You have to have everything else dialed in also. The most important things in training is that trifecta right there. If any one of those are off, then your training is not optimal.
It will never be optimal. Optimal means best.
Why is a fly better than a press for your chest? Outside of just saying
Optimal means best.
That optimal is a spectrum.
If you're training with great intensity, but your diet's completely shot and you're eating a bunch of processed foods, not tracking macros, then you're cooked. If you're freaking training, maybe your diet's good as well, but you're getting, a cumulative 1 hour of sleep a day or something like this, right? Then of course your recovery is going to be completely shot, and in turn then your physique will reflect that. Basically, you need to have those three things down before you even think about doing steroids. It's cooked. And the funny thing is that the people who then take steroids do that exact same thing. Their diet's bad, their training's bad, their sleep's bad, or a mix of them or whatever. And so what they do is they take steroids, then they don't get the desired effect that they have or they want, so then in turn they take more steroids expecting to have a greater return, which is ultimately stupid when everything else is completely off. It's cooked. Like, mate, just look at your physique. At what point do you get to when you think, actually, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be taking as much as I am, or maybe I shouldn't think about taking more until I actually reflect on my overall training and the level that I'm at the moment. Now, of course, there is one huge deciding factor which is going to play a role in how you look when taking certain compounds anyway, and I will get onto that in a moment. And that's not going to be affected by your diet, training, and recovery as much. So you kind of are a bit chopped in that point. But again, I'll get onto that in a moment. Because let's compare this to someone that I'm sure we all know. You've heard of Dorian Yates before, right? This guy's very open and honest about the stuff that he used back in the day, which is great. It's good to hear about what bodybuilders were doing. Now, of course, some people will hear this clip that I'm about to show you and say, oh, he's lying or whatever like that. But he said the following.
So I would say probably maximum 2,000 milligrams total. And I wouldn't do that for more than probably 5 weeks, and then I taper down, and then a couple of weeks off and go on again. So it was not constant at that dose. That would probably be like 1,000 milligrams testosterone. Wouldn't really go much over that on the test. And some Deca or Boldenone, something like that. And good old D-bol, my favourite. Occasionally I used Anadrol as an one.
So he said that the max that he ever took, whether it be for an off-season or a prep, was a cumulative 2 grams of gear. That means, of course, test with other compounds as well. I think he said primobolan and parabolan were his main compounds that he stacked on top of that. 2 grams. Now, of course, that is 0.6 grams more than the guy that I showed you, but Dorian Yates was 6 times Mr. Olympia with a physique that looked like this. And he said that that's the max that he did, which means that, of course, he was doing less at times.
What were you taking, like, right before you stopped? Like, what was the...
Probably about 1,000 milligrams a week total.
Of testosterone?
Total. Like
of
total,
everything?
yeah.
All kinds of stuff. D-ball, everything.
Bit of testosterone, bit of Deca or something like that.
And then...
Then stop.
And so it's just like, mate, when you see stuff like that, and it's funny because actually, Dorian Yates has actually mentioned before on a podcast that he would speak to people nowadays who have a physique obviously not akin to his, and he would say, oh mate, you're taking literally more gear than I did in my prime.
Each generation of bodybuilders are pushing the chemical envelope a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more.
It certainly looks that way on stage.
Yeah, and what I'm told by people that compete or even don't compete, they're just taking it recreationally. They're taking, I'm saying, mate, you're taking more than I took from Mr. Olympia, so I don't think you need that. And
recreation,
you're getting the benefit that you want, the recovery, the muscle building,
right?
With trying to minimize the negative effects. And there is going to be a certain point where you're not really getting any more positive effects anyway.
So, mate, it's absolutely fried. And of course, there are the factors that I mentioned to you earlier, diet, training, and recovery, which many people do not have dialed in to the point that it's going to have an overall positive benefit to their physique if they were to add steroids to that. But what is the main deciding factor to all of this? What's the thing that isn't really affected by the diet, training, and recovery that is ultimately going to decide how you react to these steroids? I'm sure you all guessed it. Genetics. Genetics are going to play the number one role in how you react to these compounds. Simple as. Let's just take testosterone, for instance. Now, body fat percentage is going to play a role in this as well. If you're a higher body fat percentage, then your body's going to produce more aromatase, which means that you're going to have more aromatization of testosterone from test to estrogen or E2, which means you're going to have the side effects of that, like water retention, like gynecomastia and whatnot. And so, of course, it helps if you're a lower body fat percentage. But ultimately, that's not particularly genetics, that's just the body fat percentage that you are. But again, let's take, for instance, if someone took 200 milligrams of test, or two people took 200 milligrams of test and they were relatively the same amount of body fat, depending on their genetics, they're going to react to it in certain ways in regard to their androgenic sensitivity and how much they can actually put on in regard to their muscle mass, as well as how much aromatase is in their body. So, for instance, if they both take 200 milligrams, one person may not have much aromatization, and so they're not going to have the side effects, whereas someone might have a lot more aromatization, and they're going to get those estrogenic side effects, basically. And this seems to be what could be happening here. Let's just have the assumption when we watch this video that this guy's taking 1.4 grams of a bunch of compounds that he just probably picked off of a freaking website. Maybe some of them may be fake. You never know, we could be having freaking fake gear. That's another thing as well that I get onto in a moment. But let's just assume that he's literally doing everything right and he's injecting those compounds. Then it just basically his genetic predisposition that he's not going to react to those compounds well. He's going to have the side effects. He might have some anabolic benefit, but he's ultimately not reacting to them well, so he's not going to get the desired outcome that he wanted to. Now, as I mentioned then, many people are actually buying fake steroids, fake freaking gear. Gear is actually faked quite a lot. If you take something like Primobolan, for instance, that is a steroid which people say is highly effective over time, but it's also one of the most faked steroids that you're going to get. So people will joke and say that I've actually got some real Primo or something like that.
Here's Primobolan Depot by Bayer, the actually legit Primo. I took this, back in the day. This is actually real Primo.
Real Primo in high dosages is just like Tren, minus the side effects.
And this is an issue that many people have, whether it be the genetics, the diet, the training, the recovery, or the fact that they're buying fake steroids. And that could be a mix that we see right here. This guy could be freaking buying steroids off the bloody TikTok shop, mate. I don't even know. His diet could be bloody KFC every single day. He could be bloody sleeping an hour a day, and his training could be 10 reps in reserve doing the Mike Israetel special.
Tiny waist, tiny waist, tiny waist.
I think it's magical.
Ultimately, we're not going to know. Well, he may have posted it on his page and whatnot, but the thing is, social media is fake. You present one thing, and in your private life, it could be a different thing. So we ultimately don't know what this guy's doing. But mate, 1.4 is a bit excessive. Is it not?